Hello, my name is Rosa Avila, and in this training video, I'll be covering the differences in the California version of the Fruit Chemical Use Survey questionnaire. So there's one major difference in the California survey. That would be the removal of Section D, which pertains to the pesticide section of the survey. Instead of the usual process, California gets the pesticide data from a state source. In California, the pesticide data is taken from the California EPA's Department of Pesticide Regulation. When the pesticide data is collected through the state-specific organization, the operators report the following: the site ID, the pesticide product, the crop the pesticide is applied to, and specifications of the actual application intentions. After the data is collected from the operators, the counties report this data to the state, which is then shared with NAS, instead of NAS doing their own direct data collection. So here's a screenshot of the California screening page. Notice that at the top right is where we enter the operations California EPA ID, also known as the pesticide ID. This ID may contain both letters and numbers. For operations that are inaccessibles or refusals, we want to make all attempts to collect their pesticide ID, if at all possible. Then, we ask if the operation shares the ID with any other operations. If that is the case, then we would collect the contact information for the other operations. We then continue by asking if the operation uses any other IDs for spraying. If yes, we want to collect all additional IDs. Again, we also ask if any of these IDs are shared with other operations. If that is correct, then we collect the contact information for those other operations. Lastly, we ask if the operation uses a fruit management company. For operations with a management company, we would want to contact the management company to complete the report, because typically the farmer would not have the required information. The California EPA ID is an important part of the survey, because this is what helps the reviewer link the operation survey data with their state pesticide data. Again, some operations have multiple IDs. If that is the case, make sure to list all of the applicable IDs for the 2025 crop year. IDs are also occasionally changed or updated for some operations. So please do not rely solely on the recorded ID from the acreage insert, and make sure to verify with the respondent that the IDs on record are valid. Finally, when collecting the pesticide IDs, keep in mind whether the operation uses multiple IDs or shares any of their IDs. This will be important information when completing the acreage table on page 6 and 7. So there are also a few minor differences in the California survey. In section B, the acreage table, the list of target crops and codes is at the bottom of page 6. Also, when recording the target fruit acreage, make sure to record the date of harvest and the California EPA site location numbers whenever required. That requirement would be if the operation uses multiple pesticide IDs and or shares a pesticide ID with any other operation. So before looking at an example of the acreage table, here are some items to keep on your radar. Some of this has been mentioned in previous section trainings. Only collect the information of the target operation and only collect data for the crops grown in California. If a harvest date is not provided because the respondent does not know, or they consider it a year-round crop, then try to figure out which third of the month they harvested by asking further questions. If they respond by stating that they tend to harvest within the first 10 days of the month, then please estimate the 5th of the month as the date. If they tend to harvest or expect to harvest during the days 11 and 20, then estimate the harvest date as the 15th of the month. Now, if they report that they expect to harvest between day 21 and the end of the month, then please estimate the 25th as the harvest date. If no date or month is provided by the respondent, then please refer to the usual harvest dates table that's on the NASTA website in order to estimate the missing dates. Remember, if the crop was never harvested due to weather issues, labor issues, crop quality, or other economic reasons, then cross the item box from the form and provide a comment. Here's an example of how to record the data on the California acreage table. We have columns 1 through 6. On column 1, we report the crop name. Column 2, we report the crop code. On column 3, we report the acreage to the nearest tenth of an acre. On column 4, we report whether or not the crop was sprayed. On column 5, we report the end harvest date for the 2024 crop year. And on column 6, we report the end harvest date for the 2025 crop year. Now, make sure that if we have any blank dates, again, examples given that the crop was not harvested due to any reason, then please provide a comment to justify the missing harvest date. If the interview occurs while harvest is still not completed, then inquire about an expected harvest date and record the date. The year-to-year harvest dates tend to be close to one another and not differ by more than 2 months. But if they do differ by more than 2 months, such as the grapefruits in this example, then please provide a comment confirming that this is correct. And here's an example of how to complete the site location numbers on page 7. These site IDs will ultimately allow us to sort out which chemicals were sprayed on what specific crops for a specific operation when they use multiple IDs or share their IDs. So let me describe more information regarding the EPA site location numbers. So EPA site location numbers are IDs assigned to physical field locations at the discretion of either the county ag commissioners or the growers. Growers are required to process spray permits through the California ag commissioners for every pesticide that they desire to spray on any particular site ID. Hence, this is how we're able to link their data. Again, this information is only required if the operation uses multiple IDs and or shares an ID with another operation. So here's an example of an operation which uses more than one pesticide ID. Knowing this, they are already expected to report the EPA site location numbers. So this is how the California acreage table would be completed when EPA site location numbers are required. To keep track of the complete list of the acres and site locations, the enumerator first collected all the data for one pesticide ID, then the data for the second ID, then the third ID. This also helps prevent double reporting of the acres. This breakup by pesticide ID is not required but would help the enumerator account for all the correct site locations per target crop. Notice that line 4 of the EPA site locations did not fit all site numbers. Therefore, the remaining sites were added to the lines below. The line numbers were crossed out and corrected to show 04 to indicate that the additional sites belong with line 04. Other number lines were also adjusted for line 05. The only recommendation that I would make for this table to be more ready for keying purposes would be to not skip any rows. For keyed reports, this could be an issue in the tool used for data review. Otherwise, this is a perfect example of how to complete this table correctly. You may also write any additional comments in the margins of this table if you think that it could help us during our review. Again, please remember to skip the EPA site location numbers if they are not required. More examples of the California acreage table are included in Section B, training videos. So that is it for this last section. Thank you so much for your time.